welcome everyone. I'm very excited to have you all here. I'm Ina, and I'm from Gradoscope, which is a newly launched organization focused on the reinvention of the cities. And today we are here as part, as a series of our discussion series that we started recently in order to reflect on how COVID changed the way we perceive our cities. So this is one part of our series talk. And today we are going to be talking about mobility, which is, I think, a field, one of the fields radically impacted by COVID. I think we can all agree on that. And so today we have here Daisy Naranyan, which is Director of Urbanism of Trans, a UK-based charity focused on promoting walking and cycling. And her role there involves interweaving policy, public realm design, and broad integration of key place principles to help create livable towns and cities. And we have Petko Anchev, who is the Operation Manager for Lime for both Bulgaria and Greece. And Lime is the first shared service for electrical scooters in Bulgaria. And prior to this, he was part of the team of Green Sofia, a municipal entity focused on developing green and sustainable strategies for Sofia. And last, we have Metodi Avramov from the Center for City Mobility of Sofia Municipality. And there he's a Director of Strategies, Innovation, and International Projects. So this is just the brief introduction, so you all know each other a bit. And I am a trained architect and by no means a mobility expert, but I think, as I already said, it's very clear that the current pandemic situation changed a lot or impacted a lot the personal mobility worldwide. And some studies suggest the reduction of 60 to 90% of the mobility of people, and which is actually profoundly changing the nature of our city and daily lives. And my first question to all of you is, do you think this will be lasting impacts for the city, for the mobility of the city, or is it just a reaction to the current conditions? So maybe we can start with Daisy.
Sure, thanks, Ina. Thanks for inviting me to come in, to join this discussion, because I think it's such an important discussion to have right now, and so much happening across the world that we can share and inspire each other and learn from each other. So really excited to be here. So I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland. And, like you said, I don't think we will ever see the return to transport the way it was before COVID, especially looking at what's happening in Edinburgh and Scotland, the wider UK conversation around mobility and transport. I think it has changed, in a very profound way, in a comprehensive way. But I think there's an opportunity now to really look at, three horizons, as we call it. Right now, while we're in lockdown, what's happening? Look at a medium-term kind of temporary infrastructure, things that start to look at what changes can be made on us while we're going through this issue. And finally, the longer term horizon of what we want our cities to be, how do we want, what kind of change do we want to see? What kind of places do we want to live in? And I think those three discussions should happen at the same time right now while we're starting to emerge from lockdown. And I suppose the final point is, in a lot of cities, and Petko, you and I, we were in Madrid a couple of years ago discussing mobility and city building and placemaking. And the climate emergency, I think, has changed the narrative as well. The fact that, it's there, it's looming. Many cities are already starting to look at policies to look at, how you respond to the climate emergency. So I think there is a real opportunity now to accelerate some of that change that was already happening and to start to, to change the conversation around how we do things so people can come along with us when we make that change. So yeah, that's, my initial thoughts on, I think, how profoundly the change is going to affect all of us.
So Daisy, you were saying that this will be a long-lasting, profound change. I believe so. Okay, so maybe Metodi, what can you say from the city perspective? Do you also perceive this change as a or is this change impacting the Sofia city policies?
Yes, Sofia is not an exception. Worldwide, we are impacted by the current situation. We are following actually the trends and the latest news from we are a member of UITP, the Polis, Eurocities. So we are looking what is happening also in Europe. One of the latest researches shows that if there is no more, let's say, waves of virus spread, we will have within 2 years we will return to 80% of the passenger flow, let's say passengers in public transport, at least. Like everywhere else, I think there will be long-lasting impact of the teleworking, for example. Even after the crisis, teleworking will remain, if not in the same way like now with the lockdown, but this is a new opportunity for employers to reduce some costs. So the teleworking will have a long-lasting impact on work trips. We are now experiencing a lot of yes, with the teleworking, with the schools working also in some let's say shifts. Some minors or different classes are some of them are going to school, some of them are studying at home, remote education, but yes, this is as a structure of trips. We are now observing this change. So as a structure of trips, this will have a long-lasting impact on the mobility in the city. What we actually learned during this past years, we made some mistakes as well. We have to be honest, because in the beginning we didn't know what to expect. Nobody knows. Nobody knew what to expect. For example, we consider as a mistake the 2 months closure or suspension of the paid parking zones in the city of Sofia. You know, in the beginning, the messages were, now we consider this as a mistake, but the messages were, do not use public transportation, or as a public space, avoid public spaces, and public transportation as a public space was also considered as dangerous. And this will have a long-lasting impact on perception of a car as a safe environment. So we had this message spread that use your car. We will suspend the paid parking zones, which led to a lot of chaos in the city with the whole mobility. Now this is considered as a mistake, and there are now a lot of researches which are pointed out that actually it's safe. The public transport is having minor, less than 0.001% of let's say spread of the virus impact. So public transport is generally safe. This message should be communicated to the public. Also, that of course, in keeping all of the safety measures, disinfection, cleaning, and all of the prescribe or all of the measures which the health authorities indicated. So the public transport now, it's in a very bad shape. Without the support of the state or the city, it will be probably impossible to keep the same level of service. And I have to point out that for the public transport, we kept the service at its maximum level during the past year. Even in the summertime, when usually the services decreased because it's a holiday period. In Sofia, we had a full capacity. So in order to maintain the social distancing and to keep some basic service running. So because of this, we actually produced more vehicle kilometers as a public transport. We produced more vehicle kilometers in 2020 than in 2019. So in a pandemic year, we had more public transport supply than in non-pandemic year. This was important for keeping city moving. But in order to keep this, we need now support, financial support from the state and from the city, because it is related to cost. I could expand or could elaborate a little bit further if we have time later or now for the new ticketing system, which we are implementing, which will allow us to manage this situation better. As in other cities, the ticketing system is a tool to maintain the demand, but also the new ticketing system is having a crowding function. All public transport vehicles will have a camera. They have cameras, so they will record, and based on these cameras, we could tell the capacity and the crowding in each vehicle. So in the journey planner, we will implement some features for passengers if they now the current options are for shortest trip, for least walking, or for least transfers. But we will implement the option for to have a public transport vehicles with less people in them, meaning it could be with more trips, but to avoid crowds and to have more social and space distance. This will help us, or will help passengers to plan their trips in not so crowded buses.
Okay, maybe when we discuss later the technology aspects of the future mobility, then we can further elaborate on this topic. Maybe I'll just ask now Petko, from his perspective, from the private sector, especially launching this service. I think you launched Lime recently. Let's say
it was 2019 in August.
2019 in August. So it was very, let's say, a weird moment to launch such a shared service with the mobility. But how did you experience this situation from your perspective?
First of all, thanks to you and to Gradoscope for the invitation. I'm delighted to see both Metodi and Daisy on this call today. And I was thinking that when we think about the kind of the future and how services will be developed, I think both private and maybe public developers of different transportation solutions, they will both like to answer the question, do we want to design our services in a way where we can react more suitably to a global pandemic? And that for sure would cost more money. As you just heard Metodi, he and his team, they're wondering, are there ways to provide a good public transportation service, but not to allow crowding? That would cost money. And if you listen to a guy like Bill Gates, who turns out knows what he's talking about, a new pandemic is always just around the corner. However, as Daisy correctly pointed out, the climate emergency is actually the overarching issue that will lead us ahead and charge the next economic boom that will take place in the next years or so. In our case, in Lime's case, our solution and our solutions are focused purely on single passenger open air transportation. So in a sense, we are ready by default and design for such situations. In the case where we take Bulgaria, we launched in August of 2019, and then we paused our operations in March of 2020, right at the start of the first lockdown. We were foreseeing that there will be a huge decrease in demand for transportation services in general, we were correct. And then we decided last year in September of 2020 to come back to the city and restructure our business, and we did that so successfully.
Thank you, Petko. So it's I think all of your practices in your organization are focused in a way of promoting sustainable mobility networks and promoting more pedestrian cycling, public transport, etc. I think with this pandemic, we saw a lot broadcasted examples of Milan, for example, a city which turned completely the car lanes into pedestrian zones indefinitely, and also Paris with the concepts of the 15-minute city. But at the same time, there has been a steadily growth, as Methodi already mentioned, of personal vehicle use, which was, let's say, these are two paradigms which are parallelly flowing, but also not related to each other. So how should you deal, or how should we collectively deal with this issue, especially designing mobility frameworks? Maybe Daisy can
yeah, it's such a good question. And it's exactly as you said, you've got on one hand, the issue of people thinking that jumping in your car is safe, as Dottie was saying, that's the perception that needs to be challenged. And on the other hand, you've got this, during lockdown, you heard people say, you could hear birdsong again. And, the whole concept of localism and living locally really came to its own. People understood, that sometimes the trip across that you think is actually really long is really not as long as as you think. People discovered hidden gardens. And so there is that joy of local living that I think, with the 15-minute city concept in Paris or the 20-minute neighborhood in Melbourne, in Scotland, that's now been written into the program for government, the 20-minute neighborhood, there's funding behind that. And I think that's one way of starting to look at, how we shift the narrative to making sure that the recovery we have from COVID is a recovery, and, that adds to the work that's being done in response to the climate emergency. So in Edinburgh, I can give an example of Edinburgh, what was that, 2 years ago when we met at Madrid, I was leading a project called the City Centre Transformation Project for the City of Edinburgh Council, which is looking at the City of Edinburgh's centre and changing, making it better for walking and cycling and making better places, and, involving the community in shaping what they want the city centre to see and to be, sorry. And what has happened over the past year through lockdown has been that conversation has actually accelerated, and we've seen some of the work that was meant to happen in 3 years has happened in 1 year. There's cycle lanes put in where temporary infrastructure right now, but we're starting to see real change, system change on the ground, which I don't think was possible even 2 or 3 years ago. What COVID has done is allowed us to challenge the systems and say, actually, we can make quick change, we can be agile, we can be quite reactive to situations. The other thing, I suppose, that COVID has done, what this has done, is to show, exactly as Pat was saying, the fact that you need to have those deeper, more meaningful collaborations across sectors. So, whether it's private and public, charity sector, third sector, starting to come together to really build the resilience of a city. And we've seen that over the past year as well in cities like Edinburgh, across the UK. I love what they're doing in Milan and Paris, the fact that they're able to go in quickly and, take car parking out, make places for people to come in, it's really inspirational. And I think there's so much we have to learn from each other in terms of how we can make that change go forward.
Thank you, Daisy. And Methodi and Petko, how do you envision such a multiple model in Sofia? Let's say combining city transport with also, let's say, micro modes, I would say services such as Lime, for example. Is there, I think there should be an overall model of how these different services are working, combining, and mostly enriching each other.
Yes, if I may. Sofia is have a potential. Actually, it's having a great potential with micromobility because the share of active modes, excluding walking, is very low. It's less than 2% in all the trips are made by cycling or now the new micromobility modes. So we have a great potential for expanding and for having more trips. In order to achieve this, this is also elaborated in our sustainable urban mobility plan. We have to upgrade we have a journey planner for public transport, but we have to have this mobility as a service concept and include all of the other active modes, micro-mobility modes of movement in order to gain more such trips. Now Lime was the pioneers, but we have now, Petko will say, but I think we have now 3 or 4 companies. We have also bike sharing small scale scheme. The big scheme is on its way. So I think this year after a lot of years in court appeals, finally the big bike sharing scheme will be in operation, which is of course a condition to have a biggest mode share for cycling. So from the side of the city or urban mobility center, we are organizer, public transport and transport organizer in the city. We will encourage these trips with providing relevant services, mainly information services, e-services to passengers to have in real-time information how they can make their trip with what modes of transport, not only public transport. Unfortunately, we didn't take this opportunity because a lot of cities make some pop-up bike lanes in the cities, like the German cities, Budapest, and now they are transforming these pop-up bike lanes to permanent bike lanes. So we missed this opportunity to increase the cycling infrastructure. But on the other hand, we have with this more and more micromobility services available, the share will increase. This is definitely the case.
When it comes to cities, what I wanted to point out is that I am absolutely delighted in the way that cities saw the opportunity and packaged this pandemic in a way that says, hey, we really must reimagine transportation in cities. And I believe this was actually once in a generation chance where you can introduce a change on a large scale and have people agree with it. I'm very, very interested to see how things will develop after we regain some normality. My personal guess is that people don't love their cars less. I actually think it's the opposite. And then I'm jumping to, Daisy mentioned a couple of times that we met in Madrid, and I told her, and the rest of the participants, I told her that at that time I was representing the city of Sofia, and I said that those conferences for us, and Metodi has been on many of those as well. I say that when we go to those conferences, we kind of feel that we're looking to the future, because we look at the Western European cities and what they do, and we look at the future and we're like, okay, so we need to get there. I mean, they've always moved the needle even further from the last time around. So what we saw, it's amazing when you look back in historical terms. You see that with the economical boom in end of 20th century, end of 20th century and start of 21st century, everyone got a car in the West. They could afford to get a car. In the meantime, a state like Bulgaria was, getting richer. And by the time where we were rich enough to buy cars, the guys in the West were saying, you know what, like cities are not well suited to cars and we need to reimagine cities. And now we are caught up in this very funny situation where we need to, reimagine, rethink again, communicate to people again in a different way. And going to the second part of Ina's question, I really believe that the only accurate prediction that we can make when it comes to technology and transportation is that in the near future, there will simply be more options for people to choose from when it comes to trips that are under 5 kilometers. Recently, Lime introduced its third transportation mode. These are electric mopeds. So now we offer electric scooters, electric bikes, and the so-called electric mopeds. People will have definitely greater choice and flexibility. And again, I'm going back to cars, and I'm just really curious what's going to happen there. And for this reason, again, I'm looking to the West, and I really want to understand better also how people feel about their cars, because what we're seeing when it comes to car development is that cars are going to become even more comfortable because we would not be needing to drive them. But at the same time, that they might be electric. So that's great. They're not going to pollute. But then, as all of you guys agree, I mean, a car takes so much more space than a bike or a scooter or a moped or whatever. So it's not only about the pollution or the climate. It's actually about the process where we're thinking more people are coming to live in the cities. But now both Daisy, both Metoli and you, Ina, we're asking, okay, so are we going to see transformation where we see people going away from cities and living in satellite villages or so on and so forth, exactly because they can work now from everywhere. So this is extremely, extremely interesting. And I'm very curious to see how it's going to unfold in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Petko. So I think that leaves us with a topic that I think everybody wanted to elaborate a bit more on, the role of technology and the mobility aspect. Let's say I've also lived in very different Western cities, for example, and there I see something that I used to own a car in Germany, which was a total luxury, and it was very uncomfortable to own a car because the city made it very uncomfortable. And now living in the Sofia city center, I would really much like to see this type of shared cars, which are starting to be developed, but not so much. And I'm just thinking about the role of technology, that currently it's a lot focused on the efficiency, for example, to have a data and to monitor mobility, etc. But I think it's also due to the pandemic, the future mobility and the vehicles will be also focused on the user experience. I mean, how do we experience a certain transportation mode? Is it safe? Is it comfortable? How does it look like, etc.? And I'm just wondering, what is the role in technology in all of these different aspects? From one side, the planning of livable neighborhoods, but from the other side, the design of the future mode of transportation. Okay,
great question. I mean, it's a good question. And technology, innovation, oh, sorry, Petko, are you jumping in there? I jumped in.
Please finish.
I was just thinking, what is it that we want our cities to do? It's exactly building on what you said, that, we need to understand where we want to be, what kind of places we want to live in. We need to look at the inequalities that is baked into our transport system right now. And technology then will enable us to do where we want to go. I don't think technology needs to be or should be an end in itself, because you can have all the shiniest, most amazing technology, but end of the day, if the health of your citizens or if the economic recovery is, where do we want to be should be our first question as citizens and as a city. And I think that's where the debate gets really, there's mobility as a service at the moment, which, in Scotland, especially across the UK, is being discussed. How do you change the user experience from door to door? The integration with the ticketing and, all of that. But essentially for me, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, where do we want to be? I think one place where technology really needs to come in and help kind of shape the conversation and change how our streets work is when it comes to inclusion and accessibility. And I think that's where, we really need to come together and make sure that we understand that any change that happens in our streets is inclusive and it helps the city remain and become more resilient. So yeah, I would shy away from being specific about technological innovation measures. I think for me, it's more about the bigger picture of how can technology help us get to where we want to go to.
Okay, Petko, you've been raising your hand for a while.
Sorry, Petko,
no, please.
Apologize.
To me, when it comes to technology and transportation, I just want to give you one example. Recently, I think Tesla came out with announcement about the new model that they're going to be introducing to the market. One of the, I think, couple of promotional photos that we saw, one was from the outside, obviously, and then the other one was from the interior of the car. And one of those images was representing, the car still with a huge screen inside, and on that screen we saw Netflix movies and we saw games. So when it comes to transportation, I think the topic of comfort, because we as people and the way we develop this as species, comfort is in the center of our kind of aims and desires. Somehow that's where we're going with increased comfort all the time. But when you think about comfort in transportation, I always remember when I used to live in the Netherlands and when I used to see half a family on a bike. I love that. But then again, that also combines with the question about the climate emergency, because yes, we want to be comfortable. We want to travel comfortably, not get dirty, not get stuck with a crowd, and have our own space. And I think that's the trend that we're going to continue to see in the future as well. Question is how hard we'll be pressed by the climate emergency. And my guess is that we're going to be pressed very hard. And people show that usually they act when they're close to the edge. So I think this is what's going to put different technologies through. But as I mentioned, I mean, we see such a multiplying of different technologies that are available. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the kind of the highlight is that people will have much more options than they used to have before. And I think that's good. That's great. We're going to have more options, and they have to be clean, of course.
Thanks. So you were suggesting that climate change will press us beyond our comfort zone. So that we have to give up some conditions or some things that we consider comfortable for the greater good. I really would love to see this happening as well.
Well, on the West, as Daisy reports, I mean, we see evidence that it's taking place. However, I'm going back to that thing about economic development of different states, because when you think about states like India, like China, I mean, these are societies that are getting richer and richer, and these people, it's a hard sell to tell to these people who are just, getting higher salary. They want to have a new flat, they want to have a car, because these are symbols of economic development. And I mean, I really want to see how you tell a state of, $1.5 billion or whatever in India. How do you tell these guys, oh no, don't buy a car? I mean, these cars are, we have to look for the bright future and we have to save the planet. That's such a hard sell to do. And I'm eager to see how that's gonna, take place. Very interesting to me. I'm eager to learn more.
In India, you start by saying, don't buy your fourth car. Don't buy your third car.
Exactly.
So maybe then we would need some kind of image marketing for, let's say, sustainable mobility, which makes it also a status, something to aspire to, which currently maybe we don't have, or we don't have one that is applicable everywhere in the world, let's say.
Maybe the next generation, we hope.
Metodi, would you like to add something or your perspective on technology and mobility and the role?
Yes, first for the cars, I will would like to quote this famous public transport quote by the former mayor of Bogota, Colombia, who said this: the definition for the developed country. The developed country is not a country where poor own cars, but where rich use public transportation. It's nice as a quote, but as Petko said, now we have to sell this to the public. And I totally agree with Daisy that the technology have to enable the city vision for the development. It's not just the technology itself should not be taken as a goal, but the vision of the city. And technologies should follow that vision with the policies and the strategies. For example, you mentioned the car sharing scheme now in Sofia. This is a private company, but they actually are having free floating car sharing scheme in Sofia, But this was enabled only because the city had this policy of having electric cars parked for free in the city. This enabled them to provide this service as a free-floating car sharing scheme for the public. Also, yes, we follow all of the newest, of course, now there are this autonomous and connected mobility, even air mobility is under discussion. But again, the basic service should be into focus. I remember not so many years ago, when we discussed new ticketing systems, information boards on stops showing real-time information for passengers when the vehicle will arrive, contactless smart car system in the vehicle, but the vehicle itself is more than 40 years old coming to the stop. So this was very, very difficult to discuss, especially with Western Europe, where they have this basic service running with very high quality, and they invest now in the next level of technology to promote this service, while we struggled with the very basic of the service. Now we have for public transport bus fleet less than 6 years old. We have metro under construction now. The third line was opened recently. We have a very still prevailing model share of public transport, which we should be happy about, no matter that the cars are still having big share. But in the Sustainable Air Mobility Plan of Sofia for 2035, the vision is 80% modal share of active and sustainable modes of transport, and only 20% for cars. So as a general, yes, technology is needed. Technology enables, but the focus should be on the city policy and vision, and should be integrated. Not only technology, but let's say carrot and stick. We have to enable and we have to promote sustainable modes, but also we have to have a policy for parking, for residential parkings, for parking standards in new buildings. So everything is related. And now, yes, very for climate change, yes, also very important topic. Some studies now are saying that it's inevitable. We cannot stop the change. We can only adapt to the change.
It's a really interesting one about just picking up on what you said regarding, change is coming. There's no stopping the change that is happening right now. And one thing that we found in Edinburgh, across cities in Scotland as well, is that already people are hurting right now. The last year has been tough. And obviously, it's come with opportunities for changes in making more sustainable cities. But during such a time of change, to come back and say, actually, there is more sacrifice needed. You'll have to get rid of your car, maybe, and that conversation, that communication around that vision, I think is so important, and we need to get that really right. And I find storytelling is so powerful. You take the data, you have evidence, all of that, but there is nothing that compares to people coming up and telling their own stories and stories of change. And I think we need to do more of that in cities to make sure that people understand why this change is required, and why people are asking them to take public transport more and jump in the car for short journeys. Because unless you get that community buy-in, you get people to come together to say, we need to do this together, we will find that it's going to get quite difficult over the next year or so. So it'll be interesting to see how in Sofia, whether those conversations with communities are happening, and how it's, how you're managing to make sure that people get that message.
I just wanted to wrap up my thoughts with the good news about Sofia, because it was just announced that Sofia is among the candidates for European Green Capital for 2023. So I wish the city success, and there's a lot of, the good news also is that there are a lot of cities that are coming from our region of the continent. So it'll be very interesting to see how we compare to them. And I just want to congratulate the city just in general for still trying to pursue that vision. It's so important. And yes, we might be somewhere along the way, behind in some aspects, but we're along the way, which I think is the important news. That's what I just wanted to share.
Oh, this is great. Was it just announced now?
It was just announced a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, okay. So congratulations to Sophia.
Yay.
That's fantastic news. Congratulations. It's brilliant.
Well, so it was a very interesting discussion. I would like to thank you all for participating and sharing your thoughts. And it's going to be very interesting to follow the division or the development of our urban mobility, and let's say what also Petko was saying, and we've been also wondering about it, where people will live and work and how this would impact our mobility. In our previous talk, for example, the city of Aachen shared that in one big building, 60% of the workers won't return there to work, which completely changed from one day to the other the mobility politics of the city. And I think we will be experiencing in Sofia, but also across Europe, many of those cases. And as Daisy said, it's a chance to rethink our routines and how do we perceive the mobility in the city. So thanks a lot.
Thanks as well. Thank you, guys. It was interesting to me.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to meet
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. And this was my thought. Next meeting to be face to face.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Take care, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you very
Daisy.
much. Bye.
See you around, guys. Bye.
Bye.